Well, how's it going, everybody? Big Time Dom is back, and we have talked about the Goon in Whodunit. Now it's time for me to go back into the horror roots. Now, I know Horror Vision's over. I'm still taking a year's rest. It won't be back until 2023. You've already seen the Easter egg on that one, on the basically the thank you on the tribute of the trilogy. But we are going back to an old horror classic and basically on the return of horror, and that is the Monster Squad. If you don't know the gist, I'll give it brief. 5 youngsters battle against the iconic monsters. If you don't know what the iconic monsters are, then you certainly need to see them because they're very iconic. But everybody's probably seen the film. But again, if somebody who don't, again, 5 youngsters battle against the classic monsters themselves, to find an amulet that has a balance between good and evil, that can bring a limbo that can swallow the forces of evil forever. This is a classic film for me, but originally it never got the best recognition because the 80s was always one of the most craziest things for movies out there. But it had such of the best remakes out there, like The Blob and The Thing. But it had other cool ones like Monster Squad, which revamped the classic monsters, or Night of the Creeps, which had pretty much one of the most interesting things with zombies and aliens. I might get that on another Horror Vision, but probably not this year's Horror Vision. But Monster Squad is probably one of the most classic films to watch. And still to this date, I love it every single time. I still to this day love the effects in that movie. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about basically the explanations in the Monster Squad universe. Now, some of them I probably cannot explain well, or some I can't explain, period, because other people have done it, or they're just impossible to explain. Now, there are deleted scenes, but there are some that have photos, there are some that have scripts, and there are some that actually have video footage. So I suggest you go find these and watch them for yourself, because this is just such iconic. Monster Squad is that iconic that you need to see it. So let's talk about the main explanation here. Van Helsing himself has been battling Dracula for quite some time, trying to find the amulet itself. And once he does find the amulet, in Limbo itself, none other, Limbo itself, to swallow the forces of evil itself, is with a virgin woman to read a passage, pretty much to let the amulet battle for that. And it's on one day, 100 years ago, that you have to do it at the stroke of midnight. That is how disturbing that part is if it's a stroke of midnight. And even for that, Dracula has been known to being one good Prince of Darkness. In Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein, despite that being a comedy horror, Bela Lugosi still plays the straight man Dracula that he has since his 1931 appearance as him. He never played any other appearances except for, again, with Betty Boop, and also for the You Asked For It series, I think, which I'd never seen. But he did say that he wants everything, anything he says, no matter what it is, even if it is, I don't know, even if it's something silly like, I don't know, a glass of wine, even though he never drinks it. He wants that thing obeyed. Everything. He doesn't want anything like that. He's basically one guy he's kind of like those kings and pharaohs who say, give me the chicken, even though it's like, no, I'm not going to give you the chicken. You get off your lazy fat ass and go get it yourself. Off with your head. That similar type of thing. Dracula is that type of man. But again, he's a very old man. I mean, come on. To this day, he's probably what, 1,000,000 years old in the vampire lore. I mean, not the real life Dracula, but like the fictional kind. He's probably 1,000,000 years old. But in Van Helsing's days, he's 5,000. But Dracula himself failed to get the amulet, so now it's in limbo. Of course, the limbo thing happened. I think by the time the portal shut, Van Helsing took the amulet and took it across state in Shadowbrook Road, close to America, and in a mansion, which is his mansion, he buried it underneath a cavern, which has a bunch of things to stop the monsters. Mostly Dracula with the crosses and the religious items. It has been staying there ever since. But by the time in Limbo, like the Limbo wormhole that sucked them all in, Dracula did came here alongside the others. Lawrence Talbot, which is the Wolfman, the Guildman, the Frankenstein monster, the Mummy, out of all things. They all came here, and they all were in search of this amulet. Now, Frankenstein was a very different man, which we all know. He turned good because of this little girl named Phoebe. Generic, but whatever. But he was pretty much in search of the amulet, and when he finds it, I think he still had no idea how he's going to get to it with that religious stuff right there. As a matter of fact, it was so confusing because of the acting of this Dracula, which I don't know the name of this actor, but he was so energized, it's ridiculous. But I think he was just so afraid of the crosses right there, which normally when you see Dracula, he does cover it up, maybe with his eyes, maybe with his cape, mostly in shame, which is kind of crazy to say as is, which to be expected. He is basically a sadist pig. I'll say that to the Prince of Darkness any time of the week, but he pretty much was still afraid of it, but he's still kind of trying to pay attention to that amulet because that's his prize. That's his prize. He said it in the film. That's his. So he really wanted his band of monsters to just get it. But of course he couldn't. But by the time he blew it up and had pretty much scared every single one of them, he did let one of the kids to get the amulet because he's the only one who could pass through. Now, alone, it didn't work because, again, the weakness with garlic, garlic being the main weakness of vampires, and they just fled. So he had no choice but to try to, stop them at all costs, at least with all the monsters here. And of course, again, it bundles up with a main fight at the end. And of course, with Limbo itself, it happened again. Was forced into Limbo again. Now, Limbo, in my eyes, is kind of similar to that regular show episode with Walks, or Skips, as he was originally known as. Now, of course, Skips today, Walks back then. Pretty much that tornado, which is a time travel tornado, forced him into Limbo and limboed him to the present day. I think that's what Dracula and the monsters were. They were forced into those same locations. Now you're thinking, what about the brides? They never were in Dracula. Those were the schoolgirls. In a deleted scene, when the mother was actually on her bed looking at the television, 3 known schoolgirls went missing. Dracula kidnapped them and turned them into his vampire lovers. Again, Dracula being the pimp of the undead as usual, bites the neck off of a female again. Females, in this case, 3 of them, in a closet. That which is scary. And yeah, that's how the brides came to be. And again, that's how the monsters came to be. Main question is, how do they get to the present day? It was with the amulet and the fact that they were in Limbo. Probably Limbo is kind of like fractures in a universe of the Monster Squad. In the Monsters universe, there are fractures upon the universe between even the present days of the 1980s, or maybe the present day of this year, the COVID year, 2022. So, pretty much, that's what is with the Monster Squad. And pretty much that's what the Monster Squad was. Now, literally, would I expect a sequel from this movie? I don't think so, because literally that's an iconic movie that literally should stay put. I will probably do a top 10 remakes I want remastered, pretty much, or remade, just because they hadn't been remade for years. And I think those are the main reasons those should be remade. There are iconic ones like King Kong vs. Godzilla, which got incredibly remade and still probably one of my favorites, like for the classic horror movies. Like, I've seen the original Godzilla and the original King Kong. That is insane. So I really do feel like Monster Squad doesn't need a remake, no. But does it need something similar to it? Maybe. and I would love to see something interesting in it. Now, how well can we do it today? I have no idea. Hollywood is a big mess. But I do know is that the classic monsters need a revamp. Because I know the vampire craze is dead. The werewolf craze has been dead for so long. The Creature of the Black Lagoon was forget about. The Mummy was pretty much shat upon with the Tom Cruise version. So, and even the Frankenstein one, like literally I've been hearing they're going to make another, like a Frankenstein one in the Dark Universe. So I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting. I would love to see slasher monsters with classic monsters. Imagine that. Dracula, Michael Myers, or Freddy Krueger, or Jason Voorhees, or Chucky meeting the Prince of Darkness, the hairy beast of the night, the Gill Man, the Mummy. Like, imagine that, right? Imagine that. That would be insane. But I do think that's just due to the fact that, that's the fact of life, I don't think it will ever happen. But I do know as Monster Squad has a really good storyline ahead of it. It just took probably it was like Five Nights at Freddy's. It took long to figure it out. And there's not many explanations about it. Even on most famous critics, there was no explanation on how the monsters got here. And again, it was from the amulet, the limbo, the fractures of the monsters universe to today. So it was interesting. And this movie is iconic. I didn't do any scenes here, but there will be one clip that I am going to put for some people who remember it so much. But I do know I didn't want to put any more clips on it because, not only because of the whole copyright infringement shit, but because the fact everyone knows this movie. And hands down, I want all of you to watch it because it's one of my favorite horror movies ever. And even though it's not scary, it's definitely great. It's one of the best horror movies to watch. Alongside the classics, it's one of the best. But I guarantee you should watch the classics first before you start watching the Monster Squad, so at least you know their lore, their weaknesses, and who they were beforehand. But anyhow, tomorrow we're going to see one man who's, I heard, getting a return in a movie for The Walking Dead. And we're going to figure out just how long. Actually, let's get the question. How did Rick survive in that hospital ever since that whole Walking Dead pandemic happened? That's the one thing I want to know. So I'll see you tomorrow, and we are going to find out.
Give me the amulet, you bitch!